we're going to do a sketch of an apple. Here's the photo reference that I posted, so that should look familiar to you. I've just got it up here on my tablet so that I can work on that while we go. And I've got just some drawing paper. If you have some drawing paper, it is better, but you know, if you just have some typing paper or something like that, that'll be fine too. Murph, this one is for you. Okay, I've got a single crayon, and I do have a razor blade here. It's not required, but for some of you folks that might be a little OCD, this may wound your soul just a little bit. But nice brand new crayon. I'm actually going to use the razor blade to take this wrapper off, and I'm just going to cut down the length of the crayon and actually take this away. When you start to draw with a crayon, you can really use the side of the crayon to get a little bit more coverage, and the point is nice to have for just some basic sketching, but it is nice to kind of have the whole body of the crayon available. And then furthermore, I'm actually going to snap this because I want this little piece right here to be able to do some shading with it, and so this is left over for me to start my sketch. So for the apple, just if you're new to sketching, I'm just going to try to give you just a real quick guideline here. The only thing that I want you to think about drawing for this is just the outline of the shape of the apple, of course, and then a little line to indicate the divot here, and then a little bit of an outline to sort of indicate this oval shadow that's going to be coming away from the apple. That's really the only line drawing that you need to do for this. So I'm going to get started with this, and as we do these videos, you know, you can do this along with me if you want to, or if you just want to watch the whole thing first and then just do it after the fact, after you've seen it, and that maybe that way would be better. You could stop it and pause it if you needed to kind of work through it. It might be a little easier. So I'm just giving myself a basic guideline for the shape here. The little divot line that I had mentioned, that needs to go in. And there's also just a little bit of the stem that I can see. And some of this shadow coming out. Now there's a lot of more complex shadows happening in the background of this image that we're not going to really worry about with this. We're just going to do a quick sketch here. But there's my basic outline. And so now I want to start paying attention to the shadows that I have. One of the things that I tell my students all the time, and if you've been in one of my classes or if you continue watching some of these videos, the one thing that I will tell you over and over is that value is always more important than color. So, you know, here we are with a blue crayon. Apples aren't blue, but we can make a convincing apple regardless of color as long as we pay attention to value. Value is the lights, the mediums, the darks, all of those working together in concert to give us the form. All right, so I've got just a little outline here. I'll put that to the side for the moment. I'm going to use my the little piece that I broke off to actually, I'm going to lay it just on its side, just like this, and I'm going to begin to go in a little circular motion to start laying in a little bit of value into this shape. If you're looking at your apple, you can tell definitely it's very dark over here on this right hand side. So make sure that you're paying attention closely to where the darks are, and you want to make sure that they're going right where they need to. With the apple, or with any image that you're looking at, if you're new to sketching, value can be a little bit deceptive. It's kind of hard to tell where it's dark and where it's light. And so another tip that I give my students is to take the photograph that you have, in this case the apple, and then go into your phone and then convert it to grayscale, and then immediately you can see the values. So we've got really, really dark over here. The shadow is definitely, it's the darkest, especially right up under here. There's a little bit of dark value at the top of the apple, a little bit of dark value here, but notice where the dip takes place. There's a very light value right inside there. It would be tempting to think that that's down in a hole and you should make it dark, but if you'll look closely, you can see that there's actually a very light value right here. In fact, it's probably the lightest value on the apple, right inside that little dip. And then these are more medium tones around here, and this medium value even comes over here on the back side of the apple because light is reflecting up off of the table into the back side of the apple. Okay, so that's a little trick you can use if you're having trouble seeing value. Just convert it to grayscale and they jump out at you really easily. After you've been sketching for a while, you'll start to see the values without quite as much effort. And that just comes after practice. Okay, so I'm continuing to just come in here and very carefully notice I'm protecting that little area that we just talked about where that's really light. And notice I haven't gotten very, very dark yet. I'm really trying to pay attention and focus on making sure that I've put the darks, these darker values, right where they need to go before I completely bear down on this and really give it a heavy color, a heavy tone. I'm just going to go around the apple a little bit more, and I am just using the crayon, I'm laying it down on its side and just pushing it around to lay down an even tone. There's some little textures in the apple, the little I don't know what they're called. Here's the actual apple, but these little striations that are in the skin. We'll bring out some of that in just a little bit, but the main focus right now should be just making sure that you're getting the apple dark where it needs to be and keeping it light where it needs to be. I'm just slowly building up these values right now. All right, so I think I've pretty much put the dark where I need to on the apple. And now I can use my crayon, the other tip of the crayon, to come in here and sort of start to refine some of these areas that do need to be a little bit darker. And I've got a little bit more control with it by using the tip of the crayon. The apple is round, okay, so you want to make sure that any mark making, any line making that you make, that you add to your drawing, conforms to the roundness of the apple to help it be more convincing with its round form, okay? You don't want to do just some random lines back and forth because the apple really is round, so make sure that all your marks conform to that shape. Starting to get a little bit darker over here on this side, slowly building up these values. Remember, I'm keeping this area light right here. I want to protect that because it is very light on the apple. Remember we discussed it was the lightest portion. Okay, I'm ready to start laying in a little bit more heavy value over on this side. So I'm just going to take this small piece again, and I'm coming in here and I'm really just going to press down a little bit harder to really get that intense color to build up. And be careful where you're putting it. It's not really just in a random place. You want to make sure that it's going where you're seeing it in the apple itself, as best you can. Protect this area right down here. This part of the apple is actually a little bit lighter. It's in shadow, but it's still not as dark as this shadow. So make sure you preserve that area. So even though we're coming up with a blue apple here, as far as I know, there aren't any actual blue apples, but you can see that it really doesn't matter what color you use. Color is secondary when it comes to form. Value is what determines form every time. It's always the most important. So just remember that when you're working. Your values are always the most important. I probably will take a little time to get these in. I might speed up the video here just so that this goes a little quicker for you, just as you watch me put these values in. All right, now I'm getting ready to start working on this the shadow that's right under the apple. This little shadow that's right up under the apple, it's really the darkest part of the whole image. And typically that's the case. Anything that's really hiding the light right in those tight areas is going to be the darkest. And as I start to put this dark value right up under here, you can see where that value right there is starting to show up a little bit more. It was lighter, it's in shadow, but it's still not as dark as this one. Okay, so it is a lot lighter, and now you can start to see it. It stands out really nice. That's reflected light coming back off of the table surface and hitting the underside of the apple. Light doesn't just go in one direction, it wraps around all the forms that it comes in contact with. And while the edges of the shadow are really sharp and defined right here up close, where the light is first impacted by the object, the farther it gets away from the apple, it'll start to get soft on the edges. So I'm just easing up on my pressure a little bit with the pencil, with the crayon. And the shadow still has a basic shape, but it's going to have a softer edge out here farther away, and then a more defined edge as it gets a little closer. More defined and darker. You can even take this one and just put it down on its side to fill in that area a little easier. Just be careful of your edges, that you maintain the same shape for your shadow. I think my apple might be a little bit rounder than the one in the picture, the angle that I'm sitting. I'm getting a little bit of parallax error, I think, maybe, but we'll get this camera situation dialed in a little bit more as I do some more of these. do think that this, the contrast between this edge and the white needs to be a little bit more intense. I'm just going to add a little bit more in here. Not as dark as this, but that medium value needs to go in there just a little bit more. Okay, we're starting to have a blue apple here. I'm going to work on my shape of my apple just a little bit. Kind of get these edges a little bit more defined. And by the way, I am doing this with just a school crayon, but the smell of it takes me all the way back to first grade. But if you have pastels or pencil, charcoal, the exact same principles apply with how I've used this crayon. I'm just adding a little bit more value right around this edge, because the light source is hitting pretty much right here on this side, casting the shadow this way. And so this part of the apple, even though it is the edge, it is wrapping around a little bit farther away from us. Get a little point back in here. I would encourage you to use this same photo, do several drawings, do several sketches with this same photo, using different mediums. Try one with pencil, or even a pen if you have it. You can use charcoal, chalk, whatever you've got on hand. The crayon is a little bit limited in its ability to give you a wide range of values, so all the values are going to come from the amount of pressure that you're applying to the crayon. And if you're just using typing paper or printer paper, you might have even fewer values, just because the paper for your printer, it's a really slick, hard paper, and drawing paper is a little bit softer, and it allows you to hold a little bit more medium. Whatever medium you're using, it'll deposit more of it onto that softer paper. Now I'm going back in and just adding a few of these little, whatever these little textures are that are in the skin on the apple. And they're going to be a little bit darker. And remember, as you place them, don't just sort of make random marks. Make sure that they all conform to this spherical shape of your apple. Okay. Just adjusting your pressure is what you'll have to do to try to get some different value in here, some different levels of value in here. And I do move the crayon in a circular motion most of the time, just to give me a little bit of control of my edges, especially in these areas where I need to soften it. Just very little pressure. But then I can add some more here, right in the core of that shadow where it's the darkest. Okay. Okay, I think we might be good for that for today. Keep working on this. Practice this. Use a crayon if you want to. Use pencil, charcoal, even pastels if you have those. Use some kind of dry media to just work on this first one. But as you can see, we've got a lot of nice form happening here, and It's beginning to look very convincing as an apple, and it's all because of value, okay? The color is really has nothing to do with it. Form is really going to be established by value each time, so make sure you got those highlights and your medium values, and then of course your darks to really make everything come together.